First of all, I think the left, the socialists, have made it very clear that they stand against the church. Unless we bow down and accept their agenda as it relates to the LGBTQ agenda, then they'll take our tax-exempt status. And everybody in the room cheered and clapped when he said that. And of course, the other candidates clapped and cheered as well. And that just shows you where their heart is and where they're going to go. I'm not anti-gay. I'm not going out speaking against gay people, fighting gay people, or anything like that. But I certainly don't want them to force their agenda on me to where I have to accept what they say is truth. It's not. It's a sin. And I care for gay people, love them enough to warn them that if they don't repent and turn from their sin, God will judge them.
God will judge them. I'm always enamored by that. My wife, to her chagrin, we were driving. This was when we were living in Richmond, Virginia. There was a woman who was walking around with a sign that said, "Don't vote for Obama," black woman. And I was like, I have to talk to her. I need to know why. Now, she was one of these people who was basically saying gay is against God. And because it's against God, she so fervently believed it that she believed that Mitt Romney should be president of the United States. And my thing to her was, but of all the issues, like, think about coming out against war. I mean, mass killings, of incarceration, meaning putting people in horrible situations, of poverty, for God's sake. A rich man getting through heaven, or has a chance of getting through heaven like a camel through a needle of a pin. All of these issues, you have a litany of issues. You're coming out for this one issue. And like many people who dislike gays, they don't want to own it. They don't want to own it. Own it. The one thing you can say about racists, when they hate blacks, they own it. They own it. It's not about God thing, it's them. But the religious community don't necessarily like to own it. So they would say, it's not me, it's God. Yeah, it's not God, it's you. You, in this keen, specific focus on this very specific issue. Here's the catch. This guy is Franklin Graham. Franklin Graham is head of the president of the Samaritan Purse and Billy Graham Evangelical Association. He is a religious zealot. And in context of being a religious zealot, he believes his religious freedom should be infinite. It should expand into all areas of everything. Key point, Franklin Graham. These are issues of law. Issues of law. What that means is a legal framework, somewhat a religious document in and of itself, or a religious idea in and of itself. But it's a religious idea where a large number of people, at the very least, have some level of representation, as opposed to you and your band of zealots' concept of God. And even wanting that belief in imaginary things to be able to discriminate against other human beings. I don't care what you think about gays any more than I care what racists think about me. Don't spend a second thinking about it. I care about it only in terms of whether or not it affects me. And when you're coming into a situation of job and hiring practices, those become issues of law, not God. And as such, law has a say-so in whether or not you can discriminate against members of the society. Franklin Graham does not like the Supreme Court's ruling basically saying, yeah, gays are part of the class that you can't discriminate against. He doesn't like it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is indeed brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. Yes, it's 5:36 in the morning. I'm probably going to go and fix my wife breakfast because I've been doing that for her recently. When I can't sleep, I figure might as well get work done. And in the sense of getting work done, usually in the mornings I try to meet her since I feel slightly bad that I basically was up all night. Nevertheless, Franklin Graham. So Franklin Graham went nuclear. He did what he could do to the height of his abilities when the Supreme Court came out and said, You can't discriminate against the LGBTQ community in your hiring practices. Yes, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 also includes gays. He didn't like it. Bugged him. He went from the height of his abilities. He did what every other red-blooded American would do when they're pissed off and angry. He went to Facebook. And on Facebook, he says some amazing things. So, and again, this argument to me puts me in the mind of the Confederates argument. Basically, you're trespassing on our liberties to hold other human beings in servitude. What? And then the argument immediately has to come, but they're inferior and not exactly human beings. You have to come up with some justification for it. Okay, in his justification, it's God. My belief in unbelievable things justifies my ability to discriminate against a protected class in the context of a legal framework. I don't care who you invite into your home. That's your business. From the standpoint of if you are engaging in commerce, something that is, yes, under the auspices of the government that makes contracts, set policy on that stuff, you're functioning under law. It is not obscene to say that law that is made by representatives from the wider public, that public including LGBTQ community, says you can't discriminate against people of that community. And you blow a gasket over this. It's just mind-blowing to me. But yeah, it does to some degree takes the belief in unbelievable things in order to come up with a justification to basically discriminate. I want to go through this for a moment because I've heard people make this religious argument before. It doesn't hold water. Today, the United States Supreme Court enacted a new law that adds sexual orientation and gender identity to the 1964 Civil Rights Act as protected class. As Justice Alito pointed out, the majority went too far, he called, brazen abuse of authority. The Supreme Court exists to interpret law, not to make new laws. Now, there are a few falsehoods there. You may not quite understand what the Supreme Court does. Yes, they interpret new law, but in the context of interpreting that new law, the interpretation itself could be seen as a new law, but no new law has been made. It's the interpretation of the law that changes people's, to some degree, understanding of it. And within the context of that understanding, that law at that point is dealt with in a different way by the larger society. But what needs to be made is the interpretation change, not the law. The 1964 Supreme Court, the law for civil rights, right here. I just want to read the first part. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was, and this was 2010, so nobody, this was, The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Race, color, religion, sex, or natural origin. That's man or woman. Identity is in the context of that. I hope you understand what I mean. Like, whether a person is a transsexual who's changing gender, whether a person considers themselves to be gay, straight, whatever, it still fits within the context of their sexual identity. Nothing has changed. The only thing is the interpretation of the law for something that has become somewhat of an issue where people are being discriminated against. That's important to understand, like, because he's basically given an entire paragraph where he continuously says that the law changed. The law hasn't changed. The law was interpreted correctly. Here is the other part. I believe this decision erodes religious freedoms across the country. People of sincere faith who stand on God's word as their foundation should never be forced by government to compromise their religious beliefs. Christian organizations should never be forced to hire people that do not align with their biblical beliefs and should not be prevented from terminating a person whose lifestyle and beliefs undermine the ministry's purpose and goals. You realize there are a lot of people who are gay Christians. there are a lot of gay Christians. And beyond the point of being a gay Christian, if a person worked for you, let's say for 10 years, that person comes out the closet, is gay, you're saying that you should be perfectly okay with terminating that person. That's mind-blowing. The fact that the person worked with you for 10 years gets across the fact that they were able to do their job. You thought they were competent. There was no issues associated with the employment, meaning the only thing that you're using is that they're gay. Yeah, I have a problem with that. You may have a problem with me having a problem with that, but again, this is an issue of law. So my issue of law, especially in the context of a legal framework, trumps your feelings about that stuff. That's obscene. I'm sorry. If you were to back up that argument, or to logical extension of that argument, if you were running or you believed in pedophilia and you were a priest that said the Bible has people who are pedophiles, God is okay with this. And since God is okay with this, my man and boy love is a beautiful thing that the state should never be able to trespass on. And you run a church of pedophiles. You're telling me that the state should be not able to intervene into that situation? That's nonsense. The thing is, you're in that situation. His freedom to want to have sex with boys doesn't trump the freedom of that boy to not have sex with that freedom. Meaning, he is not capable of making that choice yet. And because he's not capable of making that choice, that is not a freedom that you can supersede. Your freedom does not supersede his freedom to not want to be raped by you. The same thing is true for this thing from the standpoint of discrimination laws. Yes, your religious freedom may go to a certain extent, but it does not trump another individual's liberty. In this case, that liberty for that person to have a decent job without being fired and discriminated against. Yes, that expansive freedom trumps your limiting freedom. It's aggravating. Like, I don't think they fully understand or they fully comprehend what their arguments basically extend to. You can have all sorts of heinous things. It's like, we want to commit sacrificial murder. How dare the state stop us from committing sacrificial murder? It's obscene. Yes, you may say that that's an absolutist position on that, or that's a maximalist example, but it is the logical extension of his argument. This is somewhat of a matter of degrees. You may say that within the context of a matter of degrees that firing somebody who's gay matches. I'm saying it does not. That person should be able to have a job as long as they can do that job. And the notion of that person is gay, so I want to be able to get rid of them, doesn't fly for me. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. And Graham, perfectly legitimate to disagree if he wants. God bless him. But again, that disagreement is outside of a legal framework. If you are hiring somebody, you're hiring them based on law. The amount that you pay them, the way that they're going to be treated, and that they have certain rights and everything else, those are issues of law, not God. And as such, whether you can hire or fire, and the reasons to which you're hiring or fire, are also not issues of God, it's issues of law. Sorry, you feel that you want to discriminate against other hardworking Americans, and you would basically fire a man that worked with you for years if you found out he was gay. That's appalling. And I still suspect that they will probably discriminate against people who are trying to get jobs at their organizations. But the notion that you would go apoplectic over discrimination, it's not mind-blowing, but it is something that should be called out because, I'm sorry, it's a nonsensical position to me. My belief in imaginary things should trump your right to get a job and to not be harassed in that job or summarily terminated from that job, all for sexual orientation. If you can't do that for somebody who's black, if you can't do that for somebody who's a woman, if you can't do that for somebody who, I don't know, has some other particular lifestyle, you shouldn't be able to do that for somebody who has an identity that you don't necessarily approve of. Grow up. Get over it. Like, share, subscribe.